Hello everybody, my name is Squaggy and this is Deck Inspection. Here in Deck Inspection, I'm going to give you an overview of the deck, then I'm going to give you a showcase match, and finally we'll do some reflections on where I think the deck stands in the current metagame. Today, we're going to be inspecting Drajeweled Magnus.
支援の竜よ、その魂で未来を示せ。魔法竜王ドラジェルド・マグナスにライド。
Drajeweled arrived as one of the 3 trial decks in the Wildress era, but really came into fruition in DBT07, used by Hazama Michiru in the anime. The deck focuses on soul blasting 4 or more cards of different grades at a time in order to reduce your opponent's power, resulting in more guard being needed. The deck has seen some on and off success, being okay in its original form and underwhelming in its mask form. Then, the Grade 4 Ignis saw some competitive success in its debut set, and now with Drajeweled Magnus it's all new Grade 3, alongside new support. Perhaps now it is Drajeweld's time. So, let's inspect. I took this build from a Japanese locals win, and it should give you a good idea about what the deck intends to do. While Magnus is an upgrade from the original Grade 3 Drajeweled, Ignis himself is not particularly outclassed alongside its own Grade 4 centric support, so the build runs both to leverage the strengths of both sides. To start, we're on Drajeweld's new ride line from DZBT10. When ridden over by Jewel Neil Luster, Jewel Core Glint lets you search the top 5 cards of your deck and add any 2 different grades to your soul. This helps to find the missing Grade 4 or 3 for your Grade 3 turn, or units that can be called off the various units in your deck that call 1 from soul. When Jewel Neil is ridden over, you can soul charge 1 and draw a card, and on the rearguard circle it gains 5000 power. Magnus himself has quite a bit of text. At the beginning of your ride phase, you place 2 cards from your drop to your soul, letting you recycle important pieces in your main phase or making sure you have the appropriate grades in your soul. At the beginning of your battle phase, your front row gains 5000 power if you have a Drajeweld in the soul, hence why we're on a lot of Drajewelds in our deck, so we can achieve this by turn 3 to maximize our output. Finally, when he attacks, you can soul blast 4 cards of different grades to reduce your opponent's power to 0. Then, if your opponent is Grade 3, you gain a critical. Then, if you've gained the critical and your damage zone is at 4, or this is a turn you Persona rode, you can give one of your demonic jewel dragons the ability to perform a drive check by discarding a card. That last skill seems a little bit loaded, and it also seems a little bit costly, needing a high damage count or a Persona ride, and then you still discard one just to check one drive. But that's kind of alleviated with our demonic jewel dragon of choice, Drajewel. Jumping over a little bit, Drajewel has 5000 shield if Drajewel is in your right deck or is your Vanguard. And if you have a Drajeweld Vanguard on place, you can soul charge 1, then energy blast 3 to call a unit from your soul to the board. Furthermore, when he performs drive checks, his drive is set to 2, meaning in conjunction with Magnus, he's a twin drive instead of a single drive, making you go +1 off the discard. Now, thanks to this force synergy, this does seem pretty good. But how does this compare to the old Drajeweld Ignis? If you forgot or you're new, here is Ignis' text. He's a Grade 4, and all Drajewelds in your soul count for any grade for his soul blast. At the beginning of your battle phase, you can move 2 cards from your drop to your soul. Then, if you have 4 cards of different grades in your soul at least, your front row gains 15,000 power. Then, he also reduces your opponent's power to 0 by soul blasting 5, gaining a critical, and then retires the back row in the process. With Magnus' own skill and Persona ride, its power gain is the same as Ignis', but there are some advantages and disadvantages to each one. The advantage of Magnus is 4 drives over 3 if you have Drajewel and a main phase soul refill, whereas Ignis has a back row wipe and the consistency of not needing a Persona ride to hit those power lines. The nice thing about this variant of Drajeweld is that you have the flexibility in choosing which route to go each game, though Ignis is probably going to be your go-to every game anyways. To complement Ignis, we're on 2 Nocturzio. When he's discarded for your Grade 3 ride, you draw a card. Then, if you have a Grade 4 as your Vanguard or in your hand, on the Guardian Circle he's a 15,000 point shield, and on the Rearguard Circle you can counterblast 1 to move 2 cards from your drop to your soul and draw a card. For Grade 2s, we're on 2 Falkracia. She's a big beater by moving a card from your drop to your soul on attacking a Grade 3 or greater unit, gaining 5000 power per grade of that card moved. And, if your Vanguard is Grade 4, you can draw a card by moving her to the soul. She's a useful beater, sometimes fixes soul, and can convert herself for more draw. Then we're on 4 Zagan. Zagan soul charges 1 on place, and if you have a Grade 4 in your hand or as your Vanguard, lets you call a unit from the soul that has to go back into the soul afterwards. Plus, he's a booster when your Vanguard is Drajeweld. He's a great piece for early aggro and developing boards from nothing as long as you have access to Ignis, and is free unlike Drajewel. We're also on 4 Little Zargar, who gains 10,000 power if your soul has 4 or more cards of different grades when attacking a Grade 3, and he can restand himself with Counterblast 1 when you soul blast 4 or more cards at once. On place, he can also Energy Blast 3 and draw a card. He's obviously your ideal attacker and one of the best cards in the deck. But even if you don't find him, there's still a way to multi-attack. For grade 1s, we have Vapula, who can move to the soul and draw a card, and restand a unit if you haven't restood a unit yet that turn, as long as you've soul blasted 4 or more cards at once, and you have a grade 4 in your hand or as your Vanguard. Because of how useful Vapula and Zagan are, it's pretty much impossible to play Magnus purely. You have to leverage these Ignis pieces to get the advantage of the aggression. We're also on 2 compositive freaks, being a 10,000 point shield if you're Drajeweled, and by being bound from the drop zone, you can add a grade 3 or greater card from your drop to your soul, which kind of fixes some of the weird soul issues you might have. For the standard stuff, we're on 3 Perfect Guards, 1 Crest Elementaria, 1 Forbiddal to find Ignis, Geodral, or Nocturzio, 8 critical, 4 heal, 3 front, and 1 Idus Pharaoh, the blue overtrigger. Okay, may the 4 flames rage. I'm gonna showcase 2 games this time, to show off both Magnus and Ignis game plans. For our first game, we're going to be up against a lyrical deck of some kind. It's not quite clear. Willistar could be literally anything. We're going first. We're going to discard the heal and right Jewel Core Glint. They're going to go and discard High 5 for their ride into Willistar grade 1, and then they're going to call Balatia, that we now know as Lichafel. Their Vanguard checks blank, we check a defensive, and they pass the turn to us. We're going to discard for ride into Luster, and with Luster skill, we're going to put a grade 3 and a grade 1 into our soul. We're going to try and get some early pressure in, calling Zagan, revealing Ignis to call a Lithos Argur to the other column. We'll go into battle here, and we're just going to swing 10 into their Vanguard. They're not going to guard it. They're going to check a crit defensively, and we're going to swing our Vanguard into their side, checking our own crit, giving it to our side, and then we're going to swing at the Vanguard, which they are going to guard so they don't take 2 points of damage. Lithos has the move back to soul via Zagan's skill as they ride up into their grade 2, discarding High 5, and then putting Balatia to their soul to add Crossing Illuminates to their hand, which they will play and draw 2 cards. Then they will call Straja. With Straja's skill, they're going to call an Almira from the deck. In the battle phase, they're going to swing with Almira, which Zagan will intercept, followed by no guarding the Vanguard on both sides being, trigger, and then we're going to guard Straja's attack. Now we are moving to our turn 3. Here I find it uncomfortable to discard a critical trigger so that we can guard Lichafel's onslaught next turn, but I also feel uncomfortable discarding Magnus because I do want the Persona Ride, but Ignis is needed in my hand so that I can proc all the grade 4 skills, such as Zagan and Vapula. Here I do make the executive decision to discard the grade 4, and we'll see how that goes for me. Riding into Magnus, we're going to have Luster skill, Soul Charge 1 and draw a card. I already regret the discard. We'll call Lithos and draw a card. I already regret the discard, and call a Zagan with a Soul Charge skill, but no call. Lithos Argur gets intercepted by Straja, but we're going to swing for our Vanguard now, setting our opponent's power to 0 by soul blasting 4 cards of different grades. We'll CB1 and stand Lithos Argur. We're going to drive check into Geodral into heal trigger, healing 1 point damage and giving the power to Lithos Argur. We'll swing for 10, this is 15 to guard, and then we'll swing for 20, which is 25 to guard against the 0 power. They're going to check a heal trigger and heal out to 2. We'll pass the turn, but our hand is looking very shaky going into Lichafel's turn 3. They're going to ride up into Lichafel, and then they're going to call a Nilina into their back row. And then with its skill, they're going to Counterblast 1 and put a Balatia back to their hand. They'll Soul Charge 1 there, and then they're going to use High 5 in the drop zone, drawing 1 card and then calling Balatia from their hand. Here it's going to gain some power of High 5 and its own skill, and then my opponent's going to call Albelina, having the perfect formation to go into battle phase. They're going to use the Albelina column to swing at my Vanguard for 23k, not using Nilina's skill, kind of telegraphs the Divine skill, but we already know that's going to come. For 28,000, they're going to swing with Almeria at our Vanguard, which we are going to guard with a critical trigger, and using Lithos Argur to intercept. We can put Lithos Argur back into our soul via our Vanguard skill, so it's no problem. As Lichafel attacks, she'll move Almeria and Balatia to the soul, with Almeria standing Nilina, Albelina standing herself, and Balatia countercharging 1 and drawing a card, and High 5 giving Lichafel 5,000 power. And we kind of have to take the triple drive here because we need to guard the next attack. They're going to check a front and Nilina, and they're going to check a Fire Regalis, and we're going to check an Ignis for damage zone. I already regret discarding the grade 4. As my opponent Divine skills with 2 critical, I'm going to take this attack so that I get pushed to 4 damage for Geodral. I regret that. They check a crit. We check a Forbiddal for damage. I regret discarding the grade 4, and we perfect guard Albelina going into 5 damage onto our turn 4. Here you can just see Albelina's number change. You can see how big Lichafel columns can now get. Okay, let's try and make it happen. We're going to draw into Vapula for turn. I regret discarding the Ignis. We're going to move 2 cards to our soul as per Magnus' right face skill, and we're going to Persona Ride. From our drop zone here, we're going to bind Compositive Freaks and move Ignis to our soul. And then we're going to call Geodral and call out Lithos Argur from the soul, trying to draw into an Ignis, and no such luck, unfortunately, as you can see right here. But it's fine, because we're just going to move our Lithos Argur and Zagan around just so we have a big column, and we're going to call Vapula behind our Vanguard. Since we have a Drajeweled in our soul, our front row will gain 5,000 extra power, and Lithos Argur will gain 10 on his own effect, so we can move into battle phase knowing that we have some big attacks coming up. Here, Lithos Argur will swing into the 18k base that Lichafel has, which will be guarded, followed by Magnus attacking, soul blasting 4 cards of different grades to gain a critical and to reduce my opponent's Vanguard's power to 0, giving Geodral the effect that it can now drive check, and Lithos Argur will counterblast 1 to stand. They're going to perfect guard this, discarding 5 Regalis, which will get critical trigger, giving it to Geodral. We're going to check Valkyria here, checking nothing on the second one. Now Geodral swinging for 38k as we discard a card so it gets Twin Drive, and our opponent is not going to guard this, and we're going to check 2 blanks. Our Nocturzio does nothing because we have no Ignis in our hand. Lithos Argur swings, and they're going to take it, pushing themselves to 5. Now, we might have pushed them to 5, but they're about about to push us to 6 as they Persona Ride into another leash while using a 5 Regalis called Emiria, which puts a straight jab back to their soul. Then they'll use their high 5 from their drop zone, draw a card, and then play Nilenia, counterblasting 1 to put the Balacio back to their hand. And they're just going to go through the motions here as they set up their board ready to push me to 6. We are going to take the first point of damage this turn just to try and weasel our way out of it with an over trigger or a heal trigger, but even that is probably unlikely to save us. So for 43,000, we do not guard. Their Vanguard has the crit and the triple drive, and we're going to check Ignis. I do regret discarding Ignis. For our second game, we are going to be up against Nanaclear. Because Nanaclear relies on having certain units on the board to activate Stray Garden, we're going to try and go for Ignis this game to keep her off it. So we'll start by discarding Magnus for Ride. They're going to start their turn by discarding the Shield Cycler from their hand and then riding into Yotil. What a cutie. They're going to draw one card and then they're going to Soul Blast one and add the Shield token to their hand. Slow start from our opponent. They're going to just go into the battle phase with their Vanguard. We're going to guard Noctorzio, showing Ignis for the extra 15k shield, and they're going to pass it back to us. We're going to discard the Ignis for Ride, riding into Luster, and with Blink Skill, we're going to move a 4 and a 1 to our soul, being Vapula. But now I don't have much else. We're going to swing with our Vanguard, they're going to guard it with a critical trigger, and we're going to check into Magnus, and we're going to pass the turn over to our opponent. Here, our opponent is going to ride into Nocturne, and with Yotil's skill, it's going to go to back row center, and they're going to soul charge a Least Feather Dragon. They're going to swing for 18, and we're not going to guard this. We really like this slow start. Drajeweled's early game is not spectacular. We're going to discard Nocturzio for ride and ride into Magnus. With Luster's skill, we soul charge 1 and draw 1, and then with Nocturzio, we draw 1 as well. Then we're going to play Forbidal, calling a Geodraw and adding an Ignis to our hand. With Geodraw's skill, we're going to call the Vapula we just put into our soul from just now, soul charging another Geodraw. Then we're going to call Littl's Arga from our hand, Energy Blasting 3 to draw a card. We have a Drajeweled in our soul, so our front row is going to gain 5,000 power as we go into our battle phase. Littl's Arga attacks for 15, and they're going to use a Persona Shield ticket to guard that. We're going to swing 26 from our other side, and they're going to use a front trigger to guard it. Now Magnus is going to swing, and we're going to Soul Blast 4 cards at different grades to put our opponent's power to 0, restanding both our columns here with Vapula skill, drawing a card and showing Ignis, and then counterblasting 1 to send Littl's Arga. This is the ideal turn 3 basically, and our opponent is not going to guard it. We're going to check 2 blanks, and they're going to check a critical trigger, putting their Vanguard's power to 10,000, and we're going to swing for 15, 10 to guard, and then we're going to swing with Geodraw right afterwards, of which they're going to use the Twin Cast once more. Now it is our opponent's turn 3. They're going to discard the order and ride into Nanaclear. With Nocturan's skill, they're going to call it to the back row, and they're going to put a critical trigger back to their soul. Then with Nanaclear's skill, they're going to Energy Blast 3 and check the top 5 cards of their deck, of which they are now going to call a Harvest Elf. Then they're going to call Least Feather Dragon using the Counterblast here, putting themselves into Stray Garden and calling a Lettuce. But my opponent might have been too careful with damage because now they can only do 3 attacks, but they do have triple drive off Nanaclear. Here you're going to see the powers adjust, swing with 26k with their Vanguard. We're not going to guard it, they're going to check no triggers, and we're going to take 1 point of damage. Nocturne swings here, we're going to guard that, and then they're going to swing with Least Feather Dragon, Soul Blasting 1 in order to gain 10,000 power, of which we are going to guard with a front trigger, and they're going to pass it back to us. Here we want to start putting them off Stray Garden permanently, so we're going to ride into Ignis right after using Magnus' skill to put 2 cards from our drop to our soul. We're going to check our soul real quick, then we're going to call Zagan's skill, we're going to soul charge 1, and then from our soul we're going to call yet another Vapula. Here we're going to bind Compositive Freaks and put a Grade 4 to our soul, and then at the start of the battle phase we're going to use Ignis' skill and put 2 cards from our drop to our soul. Since we have 4 cards of different grades, our front row will gain 15,000 power, and Littl's Arga will gain another 10 on his own. My opponent will take the Littl's Arga swing, and we're going to swing 36k from Geodraw, of which they're going to guard, and now we're going to swing with our Vanguard, Soul Blasting 5 cards at different grades here to reduce their power to 0 and destroy their back row, which is really important in this matchup to keep them off Stray Garden where possible. Vapula skill is going to restand Geodraw, and then we're going to restand Littl's Arga as well. With the Overtrigger and Weaselin skill, they're going to be at 3 to pass. We're going to give the critical trigger to Littl's Arga, the heal trigger to Geodraw, and we're going to check a last blank. Thank God we didn't go all in. Here we're going to swing 38k at their Vanguard, 40 to guard, of which they do take, and 45k with double critical, and they're going to have to take that as well. We are in a fantastic position here going into their Persona Ride turn. Now to recoup their board, Nanaclear is going to Energy Blast 3, check the top 5 cards of their deck, calling the Ace unit, good call. They're going to Energy Blast 3 again, checking the top 7 cards of their deck, putting Edelvina to the drop, so they're calling Nocturne to the back row center. Then they're going to call Harvest Elf, and they're going to call a Lettuce as well. With Nanaclear's order, they're going to give 5,000 power to Least Feather Dragon, and when it restands, it will have a critical, so this is going to be their turn that they can try and turn things around. Going into their battle phase, they're going to swing for 43,000 with Least Feather Dragon by Soul Blasting a card, and we're just going to take that and check a defensive right here. We're going to swing for 38k with their Vanguard, which we are going to perfect guard, discarding Ignis. They're going to check a front and 2 perfect guards. They're probably going to live next turn. They're going to swing 53k double critical, and we are going to guard this using 1 heal trigger, 1 critical trigger, and 1 Falcracia in our hand. Now the ace unit is going to swing and we're just going to take that hit. No point guarding it. They're going to use Harvest Elf skill and draw a card. Here we're going to draw and we're going to find another Lithos Argur, which is great for us. We're going to check our soul real quick and then we're going to call Lithos Argur from our hand. Energy lasting 3 to draw a card. At the start of the battle phase, we're going to move 2 cards from our drop zone into our soul. So once more, we have 4 cards of different grades in our soul. So our front row is going to gain 15,000 power and each Lithos Argur is going to gain 10,000 on their own. Lithos Argur will swing for 35, which they will guard with a front and an intercept. My other Lithos Argur, however, is about to come in and they're going to guard with 2 triggers. Once more, we are going to swing with our Vanguard, soul blasting 5 cards to different grades to put our opponent's power down to 0, and then retiring their back row, and they're going to use Elementaria Sanctitude. That's one advantage of Magnus, I guess, no triple drive. We know our opponent has 2 perfect guards left in their hands, so the rest of these drive checks don't matter. We're just going to fish them both out right here. Alright, good luck to my opponent from this position. They're not going to Persona right here, but they are going to call a Weasel in from their hand to the board. Then they're going to Energy Blast 3 and add the order to their hand of non-clear skill and draw a card off it. They're going to use the order and they're going to call a Leaf Feather Dragon from their drop zone and use Leaf Feather Dragon skill, and they're going to Counter Blast 1 check the top 3 cards of their deck and they're going to call a Weasel in. They're going to shift these around because honestly my opponent has no soul left, so they can't use Leaf Feather Dragon skill to gain 10,000 power, but they do have 2 15Ks with their Weasels. The first Weasel is going to try and hit, and we're going to intercept with Lithos Argur, and their Vanguard is going to swing, and we're going to do a pretty stupid guard here. Honestly, this is just me being arrogant. This is 3 to pass. They check a trigger, and they put it onto their Weasel, and then they're going to check another trigger, putting it onto the same Weasel, so that they have a lethal swing here. They're going to swing here, we're going to full guard it with our triggers, and then they're going to use the other Weasel and hit Lithos Argur out of the game. The 2 Weasels on her board will move into her soul and draw 2 cards, but that should be all she wrote for this Nana-clear. We'll call Lithos Argur here just being a big beater. We're going to use Compositive Freaks in our drop zone, putting a 4 to our soul, calling in Falcrasia as well for the biggest number possible, and then we're going to use Ignis' skill to put the remaining cards we need into our soul for 5 different grades, and then we're just going to swing it at our opponent here, and that's going to be the game. Ignis is going to swing here, swinging for 38k, soul blasting 5 cards to different grades, so their opponent's power is set to 0 and removing the Leaf Feather from their back row. And as it turns out, that is not the game because they have the 4th perfect guard in their hand, discarding a card, and we're going to triple drive here into a front, into a Zagan, into another Zagan. And then from this position, we're going to swing a Falcrasia, moving a 4 to soul. 55,000 power is a little too much, and they're going to take it, and that's going to be the game. Okay, you've seen the deck in action. Let's inspect. What is the good and what is the bad? First, the good. 1. When the deck rolls well, it's quite strong. In the Nana-clear game, we had a lot of power on turn 3. The power reduction and multi-attacks make it really fast and aggressive when you go first. 2. It's flexible. Against matchups where board is important, you can pivot to Ignis, and in matchups where you need to get hyper-aggressive, you can leverage Magnus' drive checks. Okay, let's do the bad now. The deck has a pretty fragile early game, having very little natural draw or units that you want to play early to contest the board. You can kind of use Zagan for it, and you can run things like Tiskars and Bifrons and Focalors to bolster your hand, but it doesn't really change the overall early weakness of the deck. The deck is also kind of fragile late game if you're going for the Magnus game plan, since it needs a high damage for its maximum output without the kind of shielding a deck like Liel has. Secondly, you need to find Ignis for half the deck to work. It's not a new problem for Drajeweled, but it's certainly more pronounced since this grade 3 is supposed to kind of fix that issue, except it doesn't. You still need the old grade 4 to even function. Finally, and this is going to be the reason why I don't think this deck is going to be super meta relevant, is that you can brick on the grade 3 turn more often than other decks will. In Vanguard, it tends to be that your floor is a lot more important than your ceiling of power. Decks like Toys, Bobs, and Base Rook are all good because your floor is so consistently powerful, you can't really brick in a meaningful way that reduces your power output by a lot. Whereas in Drajeweled, if you miss one of the high grades, it's pretty sad to make it to turn 3 and do nothing. This makes the deck way less consistent than other hitters in the format. Overall, the deck is okay. Drajeweled Magnus is a great improvement to the plan where you ride Ignis, but his own strategy is a little lacking right now. He has the potential for great aggression, but he's held back a lot by annoying restrictions on Drajeweld that add up to the point where it stops him from seeing a lot of competitive success. Even still, he's not really the worst thing you can build. Most of this deck can be found in a master deck set, and honestly, I find him quite fun. So if you think Michiru is hot like many others, building this deck could be a fun opportunity for you to try it out. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next YouTube short where Michiru steals my partner from me. Also, if anyone watching will be at WGP Season 3 in Singapore, and if you recognize my voice or see me somehow, maybe I have like a Quagsire merch somewhere, don't be afraid to say hello. I'll be participating and roaming the area after I go X3 in round 4. Alright, that's all from me. Bye bye.